Ladies and gentlemen, it is 6 o'clock, so we're going to call our meeting to order, and I'm going to call on Councilperson Melody Wiggins to have our invocation. Melody, if you would, please.
Please bow our heads. Our gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for this beautiful day that you've given us today to serve you, to make ourselves in a wonderful community, to stand out, to serve the citizens of Graham. We thank you and praise you. We thank you most of all for the people who work every day in our country to help keep our freedom and to allow us to do these things that we are doing tonight. We thank you and praise you for your holy name. We ask that you keep us all and lift us up as we make decisions. You provide us with wisdom and knowledge. And we thank you and praise your precious and worthy name. Amen.
Thank you, ma'am. Would you please rise for our Pledge of Allegiance?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are the Graham City Council. We appreciate everybody being here tonight, and rest assured anyone that wants to speak will have an opportunity to do so. First thing we'll do tonight is our consent agenda. A, approval of minutes, February the 11th. B, approval of tax releases. C, approve the tax collector's debt set-off report. D, approve audit contract with Stout, Stewart, McGowan, and King. And E, approve the street closure request by Graham First United Methodist Church. Does anyone want to pull anything from the consent agenda?
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we approve this as written.
I'd like to ask to pull D. I just have a question.
Would you rescind your motion for a second?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we approve item A, B, C, and E.
Thank you, sir. I need a second.
Second.
Thank you, sir. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed likewise. So we'll go approve audit contract with Stout, Stewart, McGowan, and King. Your questions, please.
I just had a question about what I guess when I was on the council before, we just had a audit contract with the accountant directly, and I was reading through the report on this. I was just trying to get a better understanding of how that works while we have the two accountants and why we don't.
The two accountants as far as, well, Frankie can answer that better than I can.
Sure. Yeah. So time flies. I'm going to say 5 years ago, there was a growing concern about independence in auditors. And since we have a relatively small finance staff, it was a greater concern because our auditors also prepared the financial statements. So with that growing concern about independence, we said, well, how can we, ensure we have independence for the auditor? The solution was the city prepare its own financial statements. Well, again, we're a small staff of 3 in our finance department. So it was, do you hire on an individual to assist in the finance department? But it was suggested to us, why not a hybrid model? You have one firm prepare the financial statements, and then another firm, independent, actually audit the city and the financial statements. So you have one firm in lieu of staff preparing the financial statements. They will prepare those statements, turn those over to the firm that's actually contracted to do the audit, Stout, Stewart, McGowan, and King. They will actually do a true audit. So they are preparing no financial statements. Previously, your last tenure on the council, the same firm prepared the statements and audited them.
In essence, they were auditing themselves.
One could say independence is the term we use, but one would say you're grading your own work, so to speak. So to get away from that, that's the avenue we chose. And I think it started to catch on with some other cities our size or similarly situated. Would rather, instead of spending whatever on another employee to assist finance in preparing financial statements, you pay an independent contractor to do that for you.
So exactly what does the one firm do versus the other firm? Because I'm just familiar with what happened before.
So the two parts are the financial statements and then the auditing of the financial statements. So one firm, Cobby, Ziegler and Lloyd, they prepare the financial statements just like they did previously. Same firm prepares the statements, and then Stout, Stewart, McGowan, and King actually audit those statements.
So we have a CPA on staff.
Correct.
And she reviews the bookkeeper's work and puts in, and
She is the bookkeeper.
but she does all of that, and then, I'm sorry, the one firm, and then Becky Lloyd.
Yeah.
That firm, she comes in and actually.
Yep. Works with our staff on compiling the data for year-end closeout and preparation of the
So
financial
not
statements.
During the year.
Occasionally, they do meet, they do come in and work from time to time, provide instruction on what to prepare so that we can pull things together. So they do provide us some assistance as requested or throughout the year.
Are they checking for any, things like if money is being moved from one account to another? Or are they checking, I guess my concern as a city council member, our legal responsibility is to make sure above all else, I think the number one thing that they talk about is financial accountability. And, it's, nobody on this council wrote the contract with Ezekiel Loy or with Stewart, McGowan, and King. How do we, make sure that our contract's similar to every other city's contract, and that they're checking for things to make sure that it wouldn't fall against anything that we're doing with airs and emissions?
Yeah, so the Local Government Commission prescribes contracting guidelines. In fact, they provide sample contracts. They also provide guidance to those that are preparing the financial statements and those that are auditing them, the things to audit. And your auditor is the one that comes in and looks at the city's policies, internal controls, budgeting, compliance with general statutes and local government commission guidelines. So that's your auditor's responsibility to ensure that you're doing things per the Local Government Budget and Fiscal Control Act, Federal Single Audit Act, all those things. That's the auditor's role. And the auditor is hired by the council. So that is entirely up to the council, what firm or RFP to use. However, there's fairly straightforward guidelines by the LGC and the state that say your auditors have to meet these standards. There's certain things you want to consider also in selection of an auditor, the independence, the peer reviews, things like that. So, and we do occasionally get the peer review information from our auditors, both our accountants and our auditors.
Everything that's in those guidelines is in that contract. There's not some things that the council in the past or in the contract that we have to pay for or that we would want to consider. I guess that's my question is, does that contract, is it just very straightforward from the LGC and just says you will have them do X, Y, and Z?
They have to conduct a minimum standard of an audit. Now, your traditional audit is not a fraud audit. It's your local government audit. And if you would look on page 12 of your staff report, you can see that that's actually the LGC form,
Right.
LGC form 205.
Right. So I guess my question is there anything else, like in the city of Burlington, does Bob, when he sits on that city council, is there anything different in our contract than is in city of Burlington's or city of Mebane, or are we all kind of under the same contract? Is there anything that we should consider, or is this should just the blanket contract that every single municipality in Alamance County signs?
I'm not familiar with Burlington or Mebane's contract, but I would imagine they're largely along the same lines. The Local Government Commission also has to approve your contract and the disbursement of funds.
Okay, so say there's a rule that, for instance, that you have to move money from, you have to come and get a budget amendment if you want to get money allocated in a budget for something else or to hire a new employee or whatever. Are those things that this auditor is checking or no?
If it's an established internal control or something about ordinance, they do review your budget ordinance, your policies, and especially your internal control policies, in addition to compliance with federal, state rules and regulations. That's the role of the auditor.
Okay, so she is doing that.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
part of the, you'll hear the auditor refer to it as internal controls. That's, they come in and they test our controls to make sure, they'll take a sample of invoices or receipts and things like that to ensure that our controls, our computer systems, our accounting, our central depository, those things are consistent with state guidelines and state rules and even federal rules in some cases.
Okay. And this contract, I assume, has not changed over the years since I was on the council versus now. I don't have a copy of the old contract, but
It has changed.
I would imagine that, yeah, it's certainly changed as they're not preparing
Formation
financial
of-
statements.
The audit committee that we have now, there's a 5-person audit committee. Each one of those boards on it, the city manager's on it, the elected official, elected mayor at the time, the sitting mayor's on the audit committee. So we go over it 3 or 4 times during the year as they're processing the thing.
okay. So, so things like moving money from one account to another, those sort of things are things internal.
They
Audit
send me the work
controls.
they've done.
Okay.
To the best of my, I'm not a CPA,
uh-huh.
but I look and read it and try to ask intelligent questions. So yes, there's an overlook to it. And as far as cities our size, people are coming here to look at our system to try to model theirs after it. Because we did this on the point, we were at this point of the spear to do this, to not be judging ourselves or auditing ourselves. That's what we were intending to do.
Okay. Is the auditor here tonight?
No.
Okay. I didn't know if they were here tonight. I just,
Yeah, the report that the council should be most concerned about is that final report that you get normally December, January,
mhm.
and it will have the compliance and it will give you their opinion. We've consistently maintained an unmodified opinion, which is what you want. So that's what the council should be most interested in, as well as the financial performance. But that's the final report that you would receive from the auditor.
Yeah, I think my main concern was not, in the past, when I was on the council before, we always got a report that said, this is where we are, this is where we should be, and these are the reasons why maybe we're high or low or whatever. But it kind of gave you a running chart of how you were doing consistently with what you were last year. And, I don't want to, it wasn't this council, but it was a different entity. And they got at the end of the year and it was like millions of dollars over budget. And I'm like, the time to figure that out is not after, the time to get the firemen is not after the house is burned down. So I just feel like I feel better, protecting the city's money, having, a financial statement every month, and seeing what that financial statement is from the auditor. But, it's whatever the council feels that
Why don't we
that
do
they feel comfortable
when
with.
the audit committee meets, let's have a report from the audit committee. Would that take care of? your
It's just
concerns?
something I was used to on the last council, on the last time, you remember what I'm talking about,
Oh, yeah, I
Jerry?
do. But
And
as I say, we've really moved forward on this into a real good position. But asking the audit committee, it is a citywide committee, to give a report is not beyond our, whatever we want to do. we can
right,
do.
okay, all right, that's all the
Um,
questions I
So
have.
would we ask Becky to do that, do you think?
Well, I think what Jennifer's referring to is the monthly financial statement.
I know, we get that already.
Right, that's sent to you monthly.
Yeah,
The audit committee would not prepare those statements, nor would the accountant or the auditor. That's done by finance staff.
But the audit
That's
committee,
independent of the audit and the financial. That's a ongoing, that's actually on the cash basis. The audit is on the modified accrual or sometimes accrual basis. So there's difference in languages there. But what you guys receive each month is on the cash basis.
I think it just gives us, you see these numbers every day, and I mean, you think of things from your perspective. but we don't see those numbers every day. So sometimes we'll get a false perception of I was talking to Jared today. He's like, we're not broke. But I think seeing like, for instance, sales tax numbers, I mean, it's just like from running a business. When you see sales tax numbers coming in, on a monthly basis, you can kind of see your business growing or see, hey, we're taking a hit or that sort of thing. So I think it gives, the whole council kind of a better financial perspective. And that's kind of like our number one job is to make sure that the finances are correct. So I think it's just really kind of for us to be able to keep up with our progress through the year so that we're not kind of like at the end of the year, oh my God, look at how much recycling's costing, or look at how much trash pickup is costing.
That
So-
information should be, those financial statements we submit each month should give you at least the bird's eye view of the finances. And in addition, a couple reports that we've added since your last tenure on the council, we've added that central depository report of where the money is invested, what accounts and the balances as of the end of that previous month. And in addition, we've also added a report. I call it a dashboard report, but it basically shows us where we are relative to our budget and also comparing that to where we were 1 year ago. And that's kind of it's a great barometer. So those reports are very, very helpful. That will give you the general health of our finances as we progress through the year.
Mhm.
If you have any questions about those reports, I'll be happy to.
Yeah, I mean, I just
drill in.
like everybody was looking at the stock market this week because of the coronavirus. So it's interesting to get those kind of reports on a monthly basis to kind of just see where you're at and where you're going.
Well, let's get back to the audit committee. You say that would not be a valuable tool to have an audit committee report?
But they will not be able to report on the ongoing status. They're coming in at the end in the 13th month. And 13th month is a real thing. So, so they come in the 13th month and provide year-end accounting. Throughout the year, we provide that from our finance staff through our finance software.
Okay. Jennifer, you finished?
Yeah, I just wanted an explanation. It didn't really say.
Well, let me poll the council. Vicky, have you got any questions?
No, sir.
Okay, with that, I need a motion on D, approve the audit contract with Stout, Stewart, McGowan, and King.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we approve it.
Thank you, sir. I need a second.
Second.
Thank you, ma'am. All in favor, say aye.
Uh,
All opposed likewise. All right. Next, we have old business, public hearing, reserved.
Just as a question on the item just covered, is the monthly.
Thank you,
Sorry, Mr.
sir.
Mayor, Tom Bonu,
But it
Alamance News.
is recorded, so.
The monthly report that you were describing, is that in the agenda packet?
No, sir. I email it out when it's prepared, once it's prepared.
All right, I'll work on getting on that list too. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Next, we have old business, public hearing, reserve on 54, application by Brandon Martin for rezone property from R12 to conditional. Nathan, are you handling this for us, please?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. The application is to rezone the subject property from R12 to conditional rezoning. The proposed use originally was for 37 townhomes with a mixture of quads, triples, doubles, and single units. There were significant amendments made before the planning board, and the application is now for 19 single-family detached homes on the lots.
Questions from the staff? Melody, please.
I do. Nathan, in your reports, let me pull it here. The TRC reviewed the application, provided comments to the applicant via the planning director. As the publishing of this contract or this packet, the applicant had not responded to the comments. There are substantial required revisions to the plans, which may result in a loss of a few units for stormwater control. Did we get all of this? Have we gotten all this under control yet? Are there more concerns from TRC?
So because this one is a conditional rezoning, the city council could require that he put a large statue of George Washington in the center of it. As such, the TRC reviews the sketch and says, yeah, it's theoretically possible or not, depending upon what the city council deems. And then once the city council gives approval for George Washington or 19 single-family detached homes, the applicant has the choice to go back before the TRC and run through the approval process. As the application is presented, it is possible that the applicant could meet all of our standards and build this neighborhood in this location, if approved as for the conditional rezoning.
So again, we're like in step 2, right?
Yes,
And we're going back to TRC.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Ricky, questions, please.
No, sir, I have none.
No questions. Jennifer, questions, please.
My question is for the developer.
Okay, he'll be up in just a minute. You don't have anything for the staff?
No.
Okay. So next we will go to the developer. Here he is. Here he comes. Would you give us your name and address, please, sir? It's nice to have you here.
Brandon Martin, 1430 Raspberry Run here in Graham.
We appreciate the work you've done on this. This is a very good presentation.
Thank you, sir.
Jennifer has a question for you. I'm going to poll the council though first. Ricky, you have a question for Mr. Martin? Chipper?
No, sir.
Jennifer?
Brandon, did you look at developing the land under the existing zoning that it was?
We did, but due to the high cost of just developing in general, we
Right.
had to,
Okay, so I guess my question is, what number of houses, what density would you have to make those numbers work?
I do not know the answer to that. That's why we went conditional, just because the triangular shaped lot, it's hard to get a true lot size equally throughout.
Yeah, I think just on the existing zoning that is there, I talked to Nathan, a ballpark figure would be around 11 houses under the existing zoning that would be able to fit into that space, probably somewhere around that
Sure.
ballpark figure. And then, and this is 19. So, yeah, you're not quite doubling it, but you're almost doubling it.
Sure.
So would you be, I guess where some people have had concerns in the past with the, like number 1 and number 2,
Sure.
could you make the numbers work if there wasn't such density? Because I know it's like 3 to 6 houses per acre, and I think you're at 6. So is it possible that you could come down on your density and still make the numbers work? Or is this just, I mean, to go from where we started to here, please believe me that I, think it's a much better project. And I think that you will have them all sold before you can get them done. But I'm just concerned about the density there and the traffic. And I know that there's some concerns that the city, that the technical people are going to take care of with the stormwater runoff. But I don't know, having a little bit of area between neighbors makes good neighbors, I guess, so to speak.
For sure. And, until we get a full civil engineering, like I said, I think we're going to lose a couple anyway through the civil. So we're probably realistically looking at 17, which is really close to the 11 versus the 37. But, just to make the numbers work, we've got to keep some sort of close to this density to make it work.
What would be your bottom number?
17.
17? Really?
Jennifer?
And there's no fencing proposed or anything like that, right?
Just a complete sidewalk. And if we're forced to do a pond, we would have to, obviously fence that. But
And what is your, when I was looking at the plans, I didn't see, I see there's, you can see the width,
Sure.
but what is the,
Total.
I mean, the depth, but you can't see the road frontage. What are those numbers?
As far as the driveways,
Well, no, from the whole lot size.
Lot 1 is marked as 60 feet wide, and so that may scale for you for a lot of the other ones.
Does that literally, does it say it on there?
Right there, that appears to be a 60.
Oh, I can't read. Sorry, so your driveway is approximately 25,
24.
24, and that's 60. And how deep from the front of that house to your sidewalk is your front yard?
20 feet. 20-foot minimum from front of garage to the sidewalk. We wanted to make sure that there was easable passable through, bikes or children playing or anyone walking.
If you were going to get rid of 2 of these houses, which ones would they be?
1 and 2.
I would highly suggest if there's some topography issues or stormwater issues or something that we not talk about a specific home, but if you want to say 17 on the acreage, that would be much easier for the TRC to work with than to say, well, 1 and 2 are gone and that's open space. Maybe that space would be in the northeast corner. Maybe that space would
Right.
be.
I'm not trying to limit you anyways, because you may have to move the other houses around to do whatever you need to do, or
For
the
sure.
parking lot or whatever. I think the thing that concerns me is the density, especially with knowing that there may be some stormwater issues, but I love the project. I think the biggest thing why I have always been a proponent of conditional use zoning is that the neighbors can actually see what they're going to get.
Sure.
So I would just say that if there's, on the conditional use zoning, there can be conditions of lighting. Is there any consideration for lighting?
There will be lighting, and then that will be turned over to Graham.
Okay, do we have anything from you on what that lighting is going to be?
No,
The city has a standard that would be required to be met.
Okay, and, and you don't want to do any fencing, right?
we're trying to leave it up to the homeowners to give them a little bit of, just so it's not a cookie cutter development.
And the landscaping is as is, right?
Correct.
Okay. Are you going to keep any of the existing trees that are there, or are all those new?
If we can salvage them, so be it. Would be fantastic, but due to the topography out there, it's going to be really difficult to salvage most of anything on that plan.
So most of those are all what you're considering going to be
New, yep.
new landscaping. Okay, those were my questions.
Thank you, ma'am. Melanie, have you got any questions?
No, but Brandon, this is an excellent plan you put together, and I appreciate it. Not only have you done your homework on the housing parts, but you've also done the public hearing question and answers, which answered a lot of what was just asked. So I really appreciate you doing that and being thorough with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Ricky?
I think you've done a wonderful job. I've put through both planning and board meetings, and when you come back with this one, fine.
Thank you.
Sir, Chip. Brandon, thank you very much. We appreciate it. Anybody else want to speak on this? Come on up, man. Let me have your name and address, please.
Kelly Jones Granja, 958 Sunset Drive. My biggest concern is the density. I think it's going to be a lot on the 3 acres. That's not quite 3 acres. I think the road needs to be widened because it's very tight around the corners. So I think that needs to be addressed as well. I'm glad that there's going to be streetlights put up, because that was a big concern of mine last time I was here. But again, it's the density, the water runoff for the storm, and the road being so narrow are still my concerns. but everything else, I really like.
Thank you, ma'am.
You're
Much
Appreciate it.
better than the first one, than what was
It was-
proposed. Yeah, so
Yes,
see,
much better.
that's, I'm glad.
Anyone else? How are you, sir? Glad to have you here.
I think so.
Doing good.
Joey Janicki, 9 Sunset Drive. From the beginning, my biggest concern is the water runoff. That and my other question is, years ago, when y'all did rezone at R12, that it was the proposal that the city water and sewer would have to go around the road to make it more accessible for any of us that want to hook on. I understand at this time he's planning on coming up the center, which is going to make it a lot more costly and a lot more difficult for us to hook on. Just think y'all should hopefully take that into consideration.
You want to hook on for,
Well, for my home, I'm possibly, I mean, we're, well and sewer, septic right now. So,
the water and sewer?
yeah. And another question, will we be brought into the city when this happens? No. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Mr. Mayor, just in answer to that last question, this project is not bringing them into the city, but if they wanted to hook on to water and sewer, they would need to be in the city.
Not necessarily. I mean, we've had requests and not brought them into the city. But normally and historically, yes, we would ask them to come into the city.
And if not, they basically pay double rate, right?
If they hooked on without coming in the city, yes.
Is this, like, where does the line stop? Is it,
Contiguous. not contiguous.
is this, is where
Is
this?
it right down the middle of the street or?
No, is where the city line stops, does it touch this property? Is it contiguous?
If this is brought in the city, it will touch their properties, yes.
So there's not a non-city parcel between this parcel?
particular property is non-contiguous. If I look on
That's what I-
the map, right? But the annexation is a question for another day.
Right.
There's, you don't have to annex. That's generally you do. But annexation would be a question that comes later.
Okay. That answer your question.
Well, that gives me another question about trash pickup. Currently, right now, do they hire an outside contractor to come pick up trash, or do they take their trash somewhere, or?
Say yes, they do. That's part of being in the city too, is getting your trash picked up. And he's got a very good point. If the water line went around in a circle, they could hook up and come into the city and
Bless you.
work out. But,
So I know that there's a rule about that, like when you're putting in a line, that you have to take it the length of your lot, right? So that the next person can connect. Isn't that correct?
Yes, and in this case, something like that could be done. As you're aware, with the conditional rezoning, the city council can attach additional conditions. But I would say that if you require that the sewer and water be looped for this, it's likely to kill the project with 17 homes. The extension costs alone for the water and sewer is unlikely to pay for, or unlikely to be paid for with the value of those 17 homes.
who was I up to? Chip, did you ask a question? No. Okay. Does anybody else want to speak on this? Okay, if not, then we're going to close the public hearing. We're going to talk among ourselves on this. So what does everybody think? Good project. All right, as far as the loop goes, now you think the loop would actually kill the project because the cost of the loop would outweigh the cost of the houses?
And that's a big expense. That would be a big expense.
I think you have to decide whether, just like when we did Cooper Estates with that annexation, there was a decision that was made by those residents that said that whether they wanted to come into the city or not, and whether they perceived that there was value from doing that. I mean, you had a lot of property owners on in Cooper Estates that had worthless land. You could have had 10 acres there with no water and sewer. It was virtually worthless.
That
And by,
was, Jennifer, that was an awfully different situation. That was a forced annexation.
no, I understand that, but
and
I'm
that's
just
a
saying,
complete
I'm
different
just,
Situation.
I understand, but to his point, if they wanted to come into the city at some point, we could look at the cost of how much that difference would be, work with the developer, come up with what that assessment would be per house that's there, and decide if they wanted to pay for it. To me, if I had 10 acres of land and I was going to have to pay what we paid in Cooper Estates, some people paid as little as $1,600. Some people paid $3,000. But if you're a developer, if you can get water and sewer to 10 acres of land for $3,000, you need to write that check all day long. I'm just saying that is the future of the growth of Graham. I don't, I'm the last person to say, hey, do this to somebody. But if I was a property owner and I owned property there, I might want to consider what that number is to bring water and sewer to my house and decide whether I want to pay for that in an assessment and work with this developer to get it there. And the city, hire the contractor to make whatever the difference is. I don't know that you necessarily want to put that all on the developer to do that so that existing residents there get that benefit. But, and like Nathan said, it most likely would kill the project and the cost. But I think knowing what that number is and making a good decision about is every one of, when I drove down there, I can't remember exactly, but it looked like most of the houses was developed, but was there, there could have been like an entranceway that goes back into 10 acres or something that, so it could be some future development there that would want to maybe connect there. It has great access to the interstate and it would be very valuable property to have water and sewer too. But I don't know what that cost is.
It'd be at least
That'd
3 or
be-
4 times.
That'd be a big cost to take that whole circle with water and sewer. That'd be over double.
Mr. Mayor, may I make a recommendation?
Yes, sir, please.
If it's approved, subject to the developer agreeing to enter into cost agreements with adjacent property owners, provided they pay the difference, then the developer would be bound by that, but so would the adjacent property owners. You could, I think, easily envision a certain scenario where one of the property owners around the outside of Sunset has a well that goes bad or a septic tank that goes bad, and they want it, but their 8 neighbors don't. And who pays for what portion of that then would be very difficult to tease out. But if it was that the developer was required to get in writing that they didn't want to participate in the cost extension, then that would be a fairly simple exchange for the developer to do, but it would allow each property owner to vote individually.
See what our motion says here.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
With the discussion that's going on, why can't we ask the developer to put stub outs between 6 and 7, 18 and 17, and 11 and 12? And at such time, the property owners across the road needed something, they could actually tap at that location. That way,
Talking about 2 such stub outs.
3,
Where's the third one? I'm sorry.
between 6 and 7, 17 and 18, and 11 and 12. That way, if anybody wants to tap into it, they would have tapping, but the developer wouldn't have to carry the whole cost.
At least get the cost on that.
That would give a venue to get it to the other side of the street at someone else's expense. That is not a bad idea.
Nathan, what do you think about that? Do you understand the?
I appreciate the concern. If it wasn't directly across Sunset Drive, the property owner would still be responsible for running it the length of their property so that the next person could get into it. And it's my understanding that for the water and sewer lines that we're putting in, I believe the most recent number was $200 a linear foot.
For sewer, at least, I would bet.
So the 300 feet adds up quickly.
What is, I guess, what's around there that would be potential? I'm sorry, I didn't think to research this. I'd like to come prepared, but what around there is like that would have realistic expectations besides the existing homeowners that would possibly want to tap in there?
I can point to the future land use plan, which says that this area recommends 3 to 6 dwelling units per acre, which would suggest that at some point it will all be redeveloped, whether that's an accessory dwelling unit behind one of the existing properties or whatnot, I'm not sure. There's also a sliver of a parcel that's behind the B2 zoning there that has, that's zoned R7. There's some power lines there. It does appear from a very high level view at the GIS topography, which we all know is wrong, but is sometimes relatively correct, that the R7 that was rezoned by the council some years ago may be served by falling through this parcel. But that piece is large enough that if sewer is pulled up to here, it may be economically feasible for that one to pull through the next length.
Would they go out? Is there an easement between those two houses at the end of Sunset that they could get to it? Is it this way?
It would be roughly between house 4 and 5.
Between 4 and 5. I just think that when they're running the lines, now's the time to make the decision, that if we can have something there that's going to possibly allow future development, that we negotiate that now, because once somebody moves in 4 and 5 is not the time to negotiate that. I think if we can make that decision now, and the developer it's underground, so what do they care?
We could make it be a condition that in as much as is possible for the development, the sewer and water lines run in Sunset Drive on the northern side before they move internal to the development, which would minimize the expense for the other property owner, for the property owner to the north. But that is making that parcel win on the backs of this developer.
But if it's not costing that developer any more to do that, at least we'd have some adjoining property win rather than no adjoining property win.
I anticipate the developer doing the least expensive installation for water and sewer. If something from that is different, then it would be, and perhaps to the benefit of other developable property, it would be borne by this developer.
You getting far enough along yet to know what your sewer depths are gonna be?
Other than to say that it can successfully hit 54, no further analysis was done. The sewer in 54.
I don't want to obligate Brandon. I'd like to hear what he has to say about, I mean, he's a developer. He might be interested in developing adjacent property around there. Who knows? But I'd like to hear what he has to say in regards to that, because we didn't bring that issue up during the public hearing. I don't know if you can.
Yes, you can ask a question to anybody, but we can't,
Okay.
we can't get questions
Can
from
I
the
ask
floor.
Brandon, can you come up, please? And just to ask you, you see what we're trying to do.
I mean, water and sewer itself, I mean, it's a high cost, for sure.
Right.
And I would definitely entertain any shared costs that Graham's willing to put forth. There's huge tracts of land behind this parcel that will be developed at some point in time. When that happens.
When you
I don't
say
know, sure.
behind, do you mean this, to the right here? Or, I'm sorry, I don't have the benefit
Sure.
of seeing the
Yeah, I
GIS
got you.
thing.
To the east,
To the east.
Okay.
which
Um,
that parcel, I believe, is interconnected to Avalon Valley and Riverwalk.
It is.
There's existing interconnections for that parcel.
So Graham would have definitely great benefit in doing that in long term. I guess it's what Whitaker, what's the
Whittemore.
Whittemore
Yeah.
property. What's the acreage on it? It's high
Large.
acreage.
It's big.
It's large. So I would think Graham would have some definitely benefit to extend water sewer to that property.
Well, the trade-off, I think, for the city is that you're getting a great development, but you're also allowing the opportunity for future development, by, obviously you have to make the numbers work. They
Sure.
do or they don't.
Yeah,
So what could you run that on the northern side of the development? Or no?
till we really get in, I mean, we got storm to deal with too. So, we've got to cross paths at several different occasions. So, those depths ultimately affect, the way sewer runs and water runs and, simultaneously. So till we have a full force plan on that, it'd be difficult to say that we could go in between 17 and 18, 14 and 15. It would be really hard to say that for sure tonight. It's the path of least resistance, and maybe that we can, Graham could, for a period of time, waive connection fees for surrounding areas on Sunset. And then if there's a tap, maybe, there's some sort of shared cost there, but I'm not sure how we can work that out.
I figured roughly in there at $500,000.
Yeah.
Multiplying it out. Sewer, water and sewer.
I'd say go over that.
Yeah.
Especially his rock.
I was going with the $200.
Please don't say that.
I'm not talking about the stubs, I'm talking about the circlet.
Yeah,
If you stubbed it out, unfortunately, you would, the people in front of one stub is gonna win. The person up the hill is still gonna have to pay quite a bit.
we need to hit gold on that site to make that work.
Any more questions from Mr. Martin?
And you said it's the big track, the connection is to the right here between
furthest
12
east.
and 13, right?
Correct.
And your goal is to go right up the middle, right?
That's the goal.
And would there be an easement all the way to Sunset to be able to tap in?
For sure.
Okay, so someone that bought that over there, they could connect there.
There will be a tap at the end, yes.
If I may, it may be between 14 and 13 or 12 and 13 or 11 and 12, depending upon whether there's rock out there or whatever. The requirement would still exist for Brandon and he would have to meet that requirement. But I would recommend that the council allow that to be flexible in there based on topography and whether there's rock underground or whatever.
But we don't need, he's already doing that. We don't need to make, are you saying that we need to make that a condition of the special use permit?
The conditional rezoning doesn't require that as a condition. But I would recommend not having a condition be that it be between 12 and 13 or 13 and 14, that it should be flexible out to that end of Sunset Drive.
Can we name the number of stub outs? Let's put it that way. Say we wanted 4 or 5 stub outs to reach out equally, sort of equally spaced.
Absolutely. Each one of those at 100 feet would be 20 grand. Am I doing that math right?
For sewer.
200 times 100 feet.
It'd be a shame to put a stub out in and never be used.
Yeah,
That'd be a waste of money to me. To put a stub out there and it not be used.
well, why would there be, why would you need more than that stub out at the end? Is there a
The
reason?
stub's in the right place for sewer, you may only need one. It's going to depend, we're encroaching into engineering and
Yeah.
topography a good bit. And until someone goes out there and shoots the grades, designs it, knows the exact depth of the receiving line, we're guessing here.
Are you going to do any coring or drilling to see if there's rock in there?
No, sir.
You can start digging.
Yeah.
Okay.
Got to. Y'all put me back against the wall.
Hey, that's expensive too, I know.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Any more questions for Mr. Martin?
No.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate you. Anything else anybody wants to talk about?
Okay, the only thing that I want to ask about, Jerry, is that it seems like there's a recurring theme over and over where these developments are being done and the road is too narrow. And then when they do come into the city, then they're expecting obviously trash pickup and that sort of stuff. I didn't notice that the road was quite narrow. I don't know that there's anything that we can necessarily do about that, but I guess I'd like to ask what the city manager thinks about what we can do so that obviously at some point in the future, this development might want to come into the city. And if it is annexed in, what do we want to do about trash pickup and that sort of thing?
That's a DOT street.
It's
We don't have anything to say about that street.
Okay.
It's a DOT street. Now, if we annexed it into the city, I don't think, I may be wrong, but
It's
I don't
still a
think
DOT street.
we
unless-
wouldn't have to take the street over. It's their street. And we'd be crazy to take it up.
Right, yeah, absolutely. I
Yeah,
would recommend against taking the street.
I would too.
but can we get a trash truck
Councilmember Talley,
through all that?
although it is an NCDOT street, NCDOT also has subdivision standards, which when we were in the
Right.
TRC, they said they would be applied to this. And so those standards would apply to this street. And if it were to propose to annex into the city and would allow for a trash truck, et cetera, it would also have to allow for our ladder truck to make the turns in it. So it would be the developer's responsibility on the developer's dime to make those improvements to NCDOT standard to subsequently be maintained by NCDOT.
I think that's a 20-foot street. I'm pretty sure that's a 20-foot street.
And a 20-foot street does meet the standard.
Right.
The curves may be too tight, in which case the developer would have to do some improvements in the curves, not to impact the other property owners, but to impact the developer's property.
If it's 20-foot ribbon paved, that's fairly consistent with say,
That-
Rogers
that's
Road.
That's a typical street for DOT, especially a secondary road. That's virtually a dead end. I mean, it's a loop. Yeah, that's. I'm thinking 20 feet that they can make it. They may use every inch of it, but I believe they can make it.
Okay.
The problem with the ladder truck at up
It
there
may
at
be a
11,
problem.
if a car is parked there, they're not gonna get around it.
Well, the only reason I mentioned is the time to do something about those corners is when the developers, I don't know what his thoughts are. Maybe he has no intentions of it ever being annexed into the city, but if he does, he might want to consider those sharp edges, doing something a little different there, to be able to make those turns with the ladder truck. No more questions.
Anybody else got anything to add to this? Then I'll move you to page 43 and remind you this is conditional. So if you have a condition, you can add it into your motion. But the motion is on page 43 in your agenda.
Mr. Mayor, I move that the application be approved. The application is consistent with the Graham 2035 Comprehensive Plan. Rezoning the property would be in consistence with policy 3.32 and 5.11 and strategy 4.31 of the Graham 2035 Comprehensive Plan.
Thank you, ma'am. With that, I need a second.
Could I just ask a question?
Sure.
Melanie, would you consider amending that to be with a reduced density of 17?
No, I would not. It will happen on its own. Is that not correct, Nathan? If they go in there and it has to be the density, TRC meets, he gets his things together and they determine that it's 17 and it's 17 versus whatever else. It's 17 versus 19. That would take care of itself, would it not?
I think it's almost assured that some units will be lost through the TRC process.
Correct.
There are ways that it could occur, but it would be very expensive for developers such as subterranean stormwater infrastructure.
Right. And would we need to have that as a condition? Would we need to say that at this point?
The stormwater is a state requirement.
Right. Thank you.
So your motion stands.
Yes, sir. It
I need a
does.
second.
Second.
Thank you, sir. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed likewise.
Wow.
Motion passes 4-1. Mr. Martin, good luck with this. Neighbors, we're pulling for you. I think this will be a nice addition to your neighborhood. All right, next we go to 2B, public hearing, text amendment, planning board meeting times, AM 2001. And I believe, Nathan, you're handling this also.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. I apologize for this long explanation, but please bear with me. The City Council has changed their meeting time to the second Tuesday of the month. As such, it is staff's recommendation that the Planning Board move their meeting to the fourth Tuesday of the month and reserve the flexibility to change the date at some point in the future. If the meeting isn't held where notice within the 10 to 25-day period would be timely, would the Planning Board recommend additional notice for their meeting? And I apologize, at this time, it's the City Council recommending additional notice for the Planning Board. If the Planning Board meets before the fourth Tuesday of the month, most of the time, the mailed notice for the City Council will be sent out after the Planning Board meeting. For example, the March 10th date with 25 days notice requirement, so we cannot send out the City Council's notice prior to 25 days prior to the City Council meeting. So the March 10th date minus 25 days would require that the Planning Board notices go out on February 14th at the earliest. We did send those. February 17th was President's Day, and a lot of individuals did not receive notice of the Planning Board meeting until the day of or the day after the Planning Board meeting. However, the City Council meeting for April occurs on the 14th, and 25 days before that would require that the notices go out on March 21st, which is actually after the Planning Board date of March 17th. As such, if the Planning Board is to have their meeting on the third Tuesday of the month, it's my recommendation that we increase the fee and do an additional notice to neighbors so that neighbors are aware of both the Planning Board meeting and the City Council meeting.
All right, questions for staff. Chipper, please.
Not right now. I'm still trying to process this. Not right now.
Well, may I ask to increase the fee to how much before we go any further?
So our current fee is $100. We did a little bit of research on what other jurisdictions charge. We are the cheapest above 5,000 in our area, above 5,000 population. The most recent notice for one of our rezonings was $147, if I remember correctly, just to publish it in the Times and the Alamance News. That did not count the paper mailing that we did, nor any other staff time or those. So I would recommend that we go on board with what the other municipalities are charging. Some of those are $500, some of them are more, but I think that that would be better handled during the budget process. As we're so close to that, we would just do an update to the fee schedule in June.
A long way to say you didn't have a recommendation, wasn't it? you're guessing that you're going to recommend 500 for the coming budget. Okay, I just wanted that out there before we continue questions. Jennifer, please.
Well, I don't think that the fee was, to the fee usually, these fees were something that were, a fee in order to be able to do it. It wasn't, as far as I know, when I was on the council before, it wasn't reflective of how much it was costing. I don't think it ever cost, much less than 140, 20. I don't think it was necessarily less than the fee before. So I think the $100 fee is fine. And I think we have an obligation to notify residents. Been a big proponent of this. I think it's a cost of doing business. And to me, I'm not necessarily so much for increasing the fee as I am for doing additional notice that I think that the citizens deserve. I mean, we've paid for a staff person to go put out a sign as well. We have an legal obligation to do the public notice and then also to send out letters. So I just think it's like you taking credit card fees. You're not necessarily sometimes going to get your money back out of it, but it's just kind of a cost of doing business. So I don't really want it to be necessarily, I don't care if we increase the fee necessarily, but I don't think it needs to be like, okay, well, we're going to charge a fee to make sure that we get back every dime we put into doing a planning request.
Melanie, questions for the staff?
I do not. Thank you.
Ricky? Okay. Anybody else want to speak on this? Dean, did you want to speak on it since you're the head of the planning board? Love to have your input.
Thank you, Mayor.
Put you on the spot, didn't I?
A little bit. Dean Ward, 1143 Challenge Drive, Graham. I have received numerous calls from citizens concerning not being notified in a timely fashion, or they'd get their notice after the meeting was held. I do think we need to address that in some form or fashion. The fee thing, I've never been a big proponent of charging fees to citizens that are taxpayers to begin with. If we need to raise the taxes a half cent, whatever, to cover additional fees across the board.
The builder pays this fee, right? Okay.
The builder?
Sure.
Or with it could be an individual homeowner requesting something through planning and zoning. So, and that's 500 is maybe excessive, maybe it's not, I don't know, because I don't know the total cost that goes behind the time that planning and staff puts into it. I know it's got to be considerable because somebody does go out and post a sign. They do put labor hours in pulling together the property owners and addressing envelopes. And so if there's something there, but it needs to be a minimum fee, whatever that fee is that council may so deem, I would think would be minimum, but I do think a second notice should go out. I think it would help people. What I hear the most is when people come is they say, I got this today at 4:00 and I didn't have time to prepare. And, I'm sitting here thinking as a planning board chairman, didn't you see that big yellow sign out there saying something was coming? But, everybody, maybe they're travelers or something that work out of town and just come in and just happen to catch that. But we do need to address maybe that second notice. I would like to see some kind of second notice.
Would moving the planning board meeting within the 25 days not work?
I personally, I'm open. It don't bother me either way. It was the consensus of the board, I think, was to leave it as is. But I do understand from Nathan's presentation and as the presentation the night of the meeting that it does create some kind of dilemma here with council if we don't.
We did it.
If we don't
messed
move.
up and didn't mess up. We liked the date.
Y'all liked it. And
it's worked out really good for us. But to move your meeting within the 25 days, you think they would work on that if we did that?
If they don't, I'm sure there's replacement people that want to sit on this board. So, they're volunteers and Mayor, I don't, whether it's the third Tuesday or the first Tuesday or the fourth Tuesday is still just one day a month. And I think we can all adjust our schedules necessarily.
We appreciate your service, Dean. You know
Thank you.
that. Yes, sir. What date would work if we change the date of the planning and zoning and not raise these fees?
So the way the amendment is written allows the planning board to set their meeting just like the city council can set their meeting. The way the old language was said that they shall meet on the third Tuesday, which is where the difficulty came from. This would allow the planning board to flex based on the applications before them and whether or not the proposed date fell on a holiday, just like ours was on the 4th of July one year and we bumped it to the subsequent week.
Okay, anybody else got any questions for?
So it would meet on the third Tuesday. And then, but then you'd have to change it for is it just 1 month out of the year you'd have to change it, or?
The amendment before the city council gives the planning board the same authority with their meeting that the city council has with their meeting. The planning board in their discussions made the statement that they wanted to make it the same regardless of what it was. So that if it became the fourth Tuesday, it was the fourth Tuesday. Now there's a little asterisk there that says, if that date is the day before Christmas, maybe we'll move that one earlier and either provide a secondary notice or something so that the public would be aware of it.
Okay.
But the standard would be the same. Whatever day the planning board chose would be that day for that year.
So when you do a notice for, say, a planning board meeting that's coming up and you have 7 agenda items on there, is that one notice?
I'm not sure that I understand the question. Let me see if I
Okay,
can
you have
answer that.
seven
that-
items on the agenda, 7 different developments. Brandon came in, 6 other people just like him came in. You have 7 items on the agenda. Do you do one notification in the newspaper for all 7 items on the agenda?
There's no current notification for any planning board meetings. The current notification is uniquely for the city council, as is our statutory obligation from the state of North Carolina and what's required by the development ordinance. The notice for the rezonings can be grouped, and I have increasingly begun to group them because the language at the header and the footer is the same, but I attempt to always have a street and the GPIN in there such that it is identifiable for a member of the public.
And would you say that the majority of planning board meetings have multiple items?
I would say that the average planning board meeting has more than one item that requires public notice.
Okay, so this idea of that you only collect $100, but $147 goes out to publish the notice. If you had 7 people on there, you would have collected $700, $100 from each developer for a $147 notice. Is that correct?
We've never had 7 rezonings on any application.
I'm just, would that be correct?
7 times 100 is more than 147. Yes.
So that's correct. So sometimes I want us to get away from this idea that we need to be reimbursing our expenses for giving the public notice, which is the city of Graham's legal responsibility, not the developers.
It is not the developer's responsibility to provide public notice by our current ordinance. It is the city's responsibility to provide that. However, if the developer doesn't pay for that notice, it becomes the responsibility of the existing taxpayers in the city of Graham.
Correct. The city of Graham has a legal obligation to notify residents that live in their city that something around them is going to happen. And me as a property owner, I want to pay that as a taxpayer as part of my property taxes that you'll notify me if there's going to be a big development beside my house. I guess I just disagree with the fundamental idea of that the developer or anybody for that matter, a resident just coming in about they're wanting to change something in planning and zoning, that there needs to be this recouped cost. Because I think you win on some and I think you lose on some, but I think for the majority of the case, you would have to argue that if an average publication is $150, usually there's more than 1.5 items on the agenda. So I would say that the city is getting their money in reimbursed fees. But I don't think that we need to use that as a standard necessarily. I think the city has an obligation to notify their residents, whether by statute we're required for the planning board or not. You clearly see that people have an expectation, and I think Dean spoke to this, and I think this council has heard over and over and over again, I'm sure the city staff has heard over again, that people are concerned that they're not being notified far enough in advance to prepare adequately to argue their case or to notify residents about a potential development in their area. And they don't care, quite frankly, what it costs, $147 to taxpayers divided by, 20,000 people, which is what I guess we'll find out under the census we have, but somewhere around there is, not even a penny. So I just want us to think about that.
Let's stop this talk here because this is a talk for our budget. It's not a talk for this. This does not mention any kind of monies here in this thing right here.
$500 though, Jerry, that's what made me
Again-
talk about that.
Again,
$500 for an
um,
individual to come and get some discussion heard before board,
I
I think
understand, but
is
this
a
does
little
not have anything
price
to do with the
prohibitive.
money. This is
Right.
just trying to set up the meetings either to correspond with our 25-day window or do two notices, all it is. We're making more out of this than what it is, I believe. We would set that during our budget hearing, that discussion will be.
Generally speaking, the ordinance, the amendment in front of you, the decision is, do you give the planning board their own flexibility to establish their own meeting date, or do you not?
Correct.
That's the real question.
And they're volunteers, and I think they ought to have their own, their own decision.
Most boards decide when they have their own meetings.
Okay. Has anybody else got any more questions or comments on this?
I just think it needs to be consistent. And as long as it's consistent, I think I'm fine with it.
Okay.
The state law will require any board to establish their regular meeting schedule. It requires the council to do so as well. So if they vary from their regular meeting schedule, it would be deemed a special meeting. And those are very, very rare. I can only think of a couple instances.
Any more questions or concerns? Well, let me move you to page 47. And remember, this does not have anything to do with the fees that we're charging. The fees will be looked at during our budget hearing. And I'm asking the council for a motion. I gave you the wrong page, didn't it? It's 48.
Mayor, I move that the text amendment be approved. The text amendment is consistent with the Graham 2035 Comprehensive Plan. North Carolina General Statutes 160A-384 requires notice to be sent out at least 10, but not more than 25 days.
Thank you, ma'am. I need a second. Thank you, Rick. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, likewise. Don't forget to look at this in our budget sessions. Look at the fees. Okay, next we go. Extra duty solutions discussion. Frankie, you want to start on this, please?
Sure. In recent meetings, we decided that we would have an opportunity to discuss our extra duty solutions process through our police department, well, emergency services or public safety departments, which is used by generally businesses and non-city agencies to secure extra duty services from our police department, most notably. Extra duty is nothing new to our police department. We've been providing extra duty to businesses that or others that have requested through the years. Generally, that's was scheduled through the police department internally and paid for by the business directly to the city. Extra duty solutions Lieutenant Velez is here. I'll try not to steal your thunder, but he's going to explain the process. And it's a scheduling service and helps mitigate staffing concerns with the police department as it relates to special events and extra duty requests.
Before we do staff questions, I'll get LT up here. If you'll come up, sir. Nice to have you here, Tony. Nice to have you here.
Thank you, sir. So, I guess is, so what, I was told there might be some questions about extra
There
duty.
will be, but give us a rough idea of what we're talking about
Okay,
here.
rough idea, all it is it's a private entity that we hired as a scheduling service. That's all they do. They don't decide on the rules of extra duty. They don't decide on anything. They schedule it. Before that was handled by staff at the police department, either a sergeant or lieutenant had to go look, had to coordinate with the chief and establish the contracts and all that stuff. And then they had to put out the sign up notices. Then somebody had to go through and try to randomly get everybody scheduled. If there's an issue with payment or somebody didn't show up, then that person was always have to coordinate and figure out what went wrong. It was just, and as we got busier and it got to be a problem, then it just became where, and Lieutenant Flood was our most recent extra duty coordinator, had to deal with that. And that just became Lieutenant Flood.
Okay.
Before we started using that, and Assistant Chief Cole oversaw it. But the issue was that he was spending an inordinate amount of time handling that, and then you got the human error thrown in there. Was it really random? And then on top of that, you had Lieutenant Flood sometimes work extra duty, so you have those appearances of impropriety, whether there was or not. So we decided that with more city events coming up, that will be extra duty assignments. Then we decided to use extra duty solutions. This is all they do is schedule it. That's their only purpose. When somebody calls and requests something for extra duty, we forward it to extra duty solutions. They make the contract signed with the city or the police department, and then all they do is schedule it. They send out notice saying, hey, this person has a job. We need this officer sign up for it. And then they have a computer algorithm that selects who got it. And then those officers are notified of what time they're supposed to be there. That's all they do.
Would you mind answering questions from us?
By all means.
Jennifer, I think you're up first.
So basically, the only experience that I personally have had with extra duty solutions is an event that was with the veterans event. And I think, I had I talked a little bit to Christy Cole, AC Cole, about that. I think we put an initial request in on September 4th, I think, for an event that was 2.5 weeks later, I think, and the 13th and the 14th. And I'm sorry, that's not right. I know it was like 2 weeks. It was 2 weeks ahead of time. And I think the event was on the 14th. This was an email that was written on the 5th. And no, one officer was assigned, another officer wasn't assigned. Every day you have to check EDS to see whether you have a second officer. You're required by the city to have that officer. So you're kind of like, okay, this is getting pretty close. I don't, getting kind of nervous because I don't have an officer assigned. And I also am required to have that officer. So the other thing that I talked to her about was, can you not make a special request like they do with other cities and other counties, like with the sheriff's department? You can put in a request for an officer and request a specific officer that is available, willing to work the event, that sort of stuff. And they were saying, well, I think they don't want to do that. So I was like, well, is there a reason? I mean, is there a valid reason? That sort of thing. And then, so we didn't find out that we even had an officer until the morning of the event, which was, of course, a Saturday. So obviously the staff isn't working here on Saturday. So, it was kind of like, we didn't really know what we were going to do or whether we were going to have coverage to close the streets and all that. And we had all these people coming. So it was a little kind of frantic, and maybe that was just an anomaly and didn't
is.
work well, but so I started investigating some other concerns that people had. And I guess, you know, with my one particular situation, it wasn't a huge deal to me as much as it is that when I started asking other people, you know, what their experience was, there were people from the school system that had said, you know, we want to be able to pick specific officers because they know the kids or they know the event and they're familiar and they don't have a learning curve every single year. I mean, you know, we don't really go through EDS for, say, like the Christmas parade, but we always have like that specific person that always knows, you know, how things are done. And so I guess my question for you is there a reason why with, you know, with the Sheriff's Department, with Burlington Police Department, with Mabin Police Department, my understanding is that you can request a specific officer, like, is there a reason why you can't?
Yes, and
Okay.
I'm not familiar with anybody allowing that. The sheriff's department may, but most places that's illegal. It's called moonlighting. When you make a contract for extra duty, you are contracting with the entity that is the Grand Police Department. You cannot contract with a private officer. If you did, then he would have to do that of his own accord or her own accord, and they would be without their arrest powers. They wouldn't be a police officer. They couldn't use city equipment. It's if they are a private person. When you contract for extra duty, you do it through the entity, and we assign the officers volunteer. Extra duty is also voluntary. So if people started requesting officers, if you request a particular one, then he's being assigned, he or she is being assigned. And that's not how extra duty works. Moonlighting is frowned upon for those in law enforcement. It's not impartial. That's not, we've had, through our training experience, we've had officers in other agencies, usually larger ones, where that stuff happens more frequently because the extra duty assignments are a little bit more complicated to handle in larger places, is that those have come with some serious legal ramifications, either liability on the officer individually or somebody doing something that has the appearance of impropriety or public corruption because you got special treatment going on. So that's why that's not allowed. Yeah.
Before you go any further, is the Sheriff's Department use the EDS?
Yes, Sheriff's Department uses EDS, as does Burlington Police Department.
Evan,
I do not know. I cannot. Yeah,
they don't use it.
yeah. I don't know if they do or not.
Okay, go ahead.
So I guess I'm confused then because I talked to a deputy that worked for Burlington, worked for Guilford, and worked for the Sheriff's Department, and they said, like, I asked that specific question. I said, are you required to go through EDS, or can you set up your own you know, someone calls you and is paying you. My understanding was that the amount of money that they pay you has to match whatever the city contract, I guess, is, or whatever that rule is. But that that they said that whenever someone goes to EDS, she says, you're going to have a bunch of police officers that are not going to sign up anymore. She said they don't want to do it through EDS. And I was like, okay. So I'm just, you know, I'm relaying the information that was
Yeah.
given to me.
Yeah, and if
So-
you would ask one of my junior officers that same question, they may give you a different answer. They're not educated on such things. So I don't know who you spoke to.
I don't think she was a junior officer.
Another agency, what they do. We don't do that, and that was the reason why we don't. I don't know about anybody deputy jumping from agency that I'm not familiar with this person or why they would do such a thing.
So you're saying that an officer cannot, I mean, there's a lot of other agencies across the nation that use EDS. And so, I mean, that was some of my concern because that's what I thought was happening,
What?
that officers were allowed to moonlight.
No. No, I mean, like, officers have other jobs. Most officers I've known in my career have had second jobs, but it's not as police officers. They go do, you know, I remember at the time we had an officer worked at a grocery store part-time, when they worked at a shoe store, you know, just, you know, we got some that work off duty. I mean, outside employment now, it's different than extra duty.
So is that something that's specific to North Carolina? Because part of the research that I did was there was a study done by Professor um, uh, Seth Stoughton that stated 400 police agencies at state, county, and city levels, and they got 162 agencies that responded. They employ about 1/5 of the nation's police, and they said about 80% of people do extra duty solutions. Not that particular company, but
Right.
they allow moonlighting. And are you saying that's something that
Extra
City
duty
of Graham Police Department does not allow? Or are you saying that that is illegal? I
It
thought I
is-
heard you say earlier.
It was, we're not, officers are not allowed by North Carolina criminal justice training standards to moonlight as police officers. They cannot. Extra duty and moonlighting are two different things. Moonlight means you yourself has a job working for some other entity as a private person. Extra duty means that somebody's contracted with your agency to provide police services, and officers selected at random from those that volunteer. There's two different things going on. Moonlight means you applied for a job and got it, and you're doing it of your own accord.
Oh, no. I don't think anybody is doing that. I think you're talking about the admin fee that the city receives.
No.
No.
Two different things.
No.
Extra duty solution has extra duty. The
Right.
Contract with the city to
Right.
hire a generic officer or officers to handle an event as police officers. It has to be contracted through the police department.
Right.
So they're not allowed to hire themselves out. When you hire yourselves out, that's when you start moonlighting, which is not allowed. Now, you want to go get a second job, that's fine. You just can't be a police officer. You have to
Right.
do your job doing something else.
So that's kind of where I'm going with this, is that, so officers that do moonlight, they obviously, or let's not call it moonlighting. Let's do pre-EDS, okay? So so they've called the city. They said, I'm such and such bar, I need an extra duty officer. You don't have EDS at this point.
Right.
Okay. Officer Cole, Assistant Chief Cole says, okay, ex-officer, you're going to go work this bar.
No,
No.
that's not how it works.
Okay.
Here's the thing, Extra Duty Solutions is not doing anything new. It's absolutely nothing new. All they did was take the place of somebody at the police department doing it.
Okay.
So what we would do, but prior to EDS, would be you had somebody post a paper calendar on a bulletin board, and officer would walk by and sign up. They had a week or two, sometimes depending on how fast the job had to be filled. People would sign up, and then somebody had to go back through and look at their work schedules, their other extra duty assignments they had going on, and try to fairly distribute work assignments to those officers. So in your example, a bar requested an officer to work an event, we would have a sign-up sheet, and then the officer would be selected from those that volunteered and go. The bar could not pick who they picked, who they got. They got from whoever volunteered to take the job. Yeah.
Okay. So you're saying that,
The process has not changed. It's just the person doing it did instead of.
right. Okay. But still,
Right.
prior EDS, you put the thing up there, the bar says, I have an event. Assistant Chief Cole says, you're going to go do it because that person makes assignments.
No.
Okay, there's 10 people that volunteered. Assistant Chief Cole is making the assignment out of those 10 people.
There you go.
Okay, all right. I'm still saying the same thing, but basically so at that point, they go and they work this event. They're carrying a service weapon, they're wearing the uniform.
Mhm.
Do you think that blurs the public's understanding of whether the officer is on duty or off duty and whether that matters?
No, it doesn't blur it. If I was off duty, I wouldn't be in my uniform. The thing is, when they're working extra duty, since you're working up under the contract with the City of Grand Police Department, you're on duty. Their powers are active. They're in their jurisdiction. They're at work. That is being the payment of what services they're providing to be provided by whoever this private entity is. That's all.
So in this study that I was reading about, because I really wanted to kind of look at this open-mindedly, not necessarily just from I became interested in it from my experience, but I really want to do what's best for the citizens of Graham. Okay. So in the research that I did, I don't know that I'm necessarily at the conclusion that where I started out. And so I just want you to help me with this process of thinking this through, but
All right.
I think a lot of people are troubled to think that police officers can sell their law enforcement authority to private companies. So obviously that's where you're saying,
That's moonlighting and that's it.
right, right, they have the power of arrest, they can do searches, they can use force. Obviously, people react negatively because we think of policing as a public good, right? So it's kind of counterintuitive to think that a police officer can be paid as a private security. It seems unfair to the public that you can just rent out that kind of authority. Like, could a wealthy bunch of people, for instance, in a neighborhood just decide, hey, I'm going to hire a police officer to come patrol my neighborhood? It seems police resources shouldn't be allocated based on who can afford them. So this has nothing to do with my particular situation. It's just, do we really want to, I guess the council needs to decide, I think, do we really want to go there? And I think that sometimes we enter into these kind of things thinking, oh, it's just a scheduling thing. But I'm just saying in general, the liability for this kind of participation is huge. And I'm actually, I think, just give me a minute, because you're going to like me, because I'm a huge advocate for the police department. So policing generally, I think, is inherently redistributive. The neighborhoods that pay the most for policing in any given neighborhood are not the neighborhoods that are receiving the most of the police services. Would you agree? The higher income neighborhoods that have the higher tax bracket pay more for police, but most of the policing happens in lower income neighborhoods, according to this survey.
You've gone way away from what we're talking about.
Okay,
Way away. You need
but-
to pull it
But
in a little bit.
my point is that private employers, or having any kind of situation where we only have a few patrol officers, what, 5, is that right?
At a time.
5
I have
patrol officers at a time.
22 in my division.
Right, but 5 patrol officers, and did you go to 4 recently because we have 1 on leave, is that
So
right?
I've worked for frequently.
Okay, so I guess my concern is for the liability, I guess, of these officers being somewhere else. So say, for instance, EDS.
That's because they're not.
Okay. EDS puts out a notice saying, hey, come work A&T. This is something that,
That's completely separate. Let me get to your question you asked previously. You want to know about the one you just asked, somebody being, we don't take them from the shift. They're not allowed to work extra duty while they're working. They have to do it on their day off. That's why it's voluntary. So the shift working tonight, none of them is working extra duty. They're on their regular shift. As far as what you say, somebody hiring a police officer to work for them privately, that's usually where a lot of confusion comes in, which is why we don't mind educating the public or anyone else that has this question. When you hire a police officer to work your event, they're not doing anything special for you. All you're technically getting is an officer assigned to you for your current geographic location. They're not going to get any extra power. They're not going to do anything extra for you other than something they would do normally. They're just doing it at your place because you needed somebody to stand by. That's what they're doing. They're not doing anything else any other patrol officer wouldn't have done. You just need them to stay still, which is what patrol officers don't.
so one of the scenarios that he gave us was in this, and I looked through, 8 different articles about this. Miami Police Department got in a huge problem for using extra duty officers. No one was auditing them. They went through a huge audit by the state, and some person was working, I think, 18 hours a day, 365 days a year.
Yes, we have policies to prevent that.
So I was very happy to hear you say when you started out that you said you have to make sure, because the number of hours you can work per day is 16, right?
No, not for a police officer. Continuous hours, unfortunately, that's we until supervisor steps in and let's say
I mean, to take a EDS job.
Our
you're not
policy
gonna
states that you have to
schedule-
have 8 hours off in between tours of duty.
So 8 hours off.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, let's get to a question for Officer Velez, not Miami-Dade. We're not Miami-Dade.
No. I'm just, they were
Understand,
using,
but tie this
Right.
channel it in a little bit.
They were using examples of, um, not, there isn't an audit, or there isn't a check to make sure that these police officers are not necessarily, no one's making, I guess, who at EDS makes sure that, how do they know the schedule here versus when they're getting assigned for a job?
No, we do. That's what we have supervisors for.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that's what you're doing. So
Yeah.
say these 10 people that volunteered, it's not going to work for 7 of their schedules. You would do that and then tell that to EDS, is that right?
No, the officers are prohibited from signing up to begin with if it's going to violate any of our policy rules.
So what is the policy before you can sign up for an off-duty,
Extra duty.
extra duty?
Before they sign, they have to be out of field training. So they can't be a trainee. They have to have completed field training successfully and not be on any work performance plans, and they have to be an independent officer, like a full-fledged police officer, not in training anymore. And then after
Okay.
that, it's up to their supervisor to ensure that they're not scheduled, they can't work while they're working. So we have sergeant over every shift to make sure they're not signed up to do stuff while they're on patrol. In other divisions, that rule is different because they work during the week. So they would have to take time off to work extra duty.
So if there's like, I think somebody had said, well, they went and worked like a big event, like say A&T. University had some big event, and officers that were signed up for this through EDS to do that. Do you think that could possibly cause us to lose officers that
No.
are
They're voluntary. Yeah, I mean, nobody made them go up there. They signed up for that extra, that was extra duty.
Mhm. Do
Yeah.
they make more money doing the extra duty solutions
Generally,
position? Yeah, more than,
the hourly rate for extra duty, I think, is $30 an hour now, which is more than most of my officers making now.
and the average is like 19, right, for a police officer?
I'm not sure what the average is anymore. Okay.
Well, not more than 22, right?
Depends on
19
the
to-
officer and their rank and their tenure and their progression.
Mhm.
It would vary.
So I guess that's just like, okay, so say somebody says, I'm a Mebane, like when you go to Elon games now, you don't even see Elon police there anymore. It's all Mebane police. I'll work an extra duty. I guess as a taxpayer, I guess I'm just looking at like, I started out kind of on this thing of saying, hey, this extra duty. And then I started seeing all of this concern, and I'm concerned as a council person, you know, do we really as taxpayers here in Graham really want officers to assume the liability of them going and working all of these other jobs? Why not just, here I'm coming, big support for the police force. Why not just actually pay the police officers a great wage that we're not having to have them go work all of these things? I just think working a 16-hour day,
They'd still be working EDS.
I'm sure they would, but I don't think they would be working as many hours
That was a
EDS.
20-minute talk on that little subject right there. Can we move on? Because this is a discussion of the EDS, not drilling Officer Velez.
No.
I was not talking
I
about
didn't feel like I
Dade
was
County.
drilling you.
And you're talking about Mebane working Elon games. Mebane is not in the EDS system,
Right.
Elon. So, you know, that's not,
Yeah,
But why would an officer want to work something here in Graham making $19 or $22 an hour versus working somewhere and making $30 an hour?
but they're not gonna work anything in Graham making like that. EDS handles everything in Graham and outside of Graham, so it's the same wage. There's no difference.
So if you've put in your hours and then someone calls you into work, but you know you're going to be comped over those hours, wouldn't it be better to get paid overtime for those hours coming in rather than going to work
he's
another
not going to
job?
pay overtime for a
Yeah,
high school football.
I can't talk about
Right,
something that's
right.
never been. That's an imaginary
Right.
thing to me. I'm here to talk about something we're actually doing.
So
and
you're
have been doing
comped
for
up to
decades.
200 and, is it 40 hours? Is
Hmm.
that right?
No,
No.
I've hit 500 twice.
You have,
It depends if you're shift, non-shift, or if you're law
Yeah,
enforcement,
240 is the vacation you can carry
exempt,
over the year.
non-exempt.
so how many comp hours can you work that they have to start paying you?
The state, based on if you're a 7K employee, I can't know, Lori. would be better.
It depends on,
It depends on where you work and what position you're in. Patrol officer cannot carry more than 480 hours.
Right.
Administrative officer like myself, I think I was like 400.
depends if you're exempt, non-exempt,
Yeah, and all that.
shift, non-shift,
Yeah,
fire,
an exempt
police.
employee who's not an hourly employee can only carry 40 hours
40.
because they don't get paid overtime.
And so can't work more than 16 hours in a day or 36 hours in a week unless it's going to be, okay, but what do we, to sign up for EDS is what I'm trying to say.
EDS, you have to be, if for anything, EDS is not a job. It is just a scheduling service. So to work an extra duty assignment, you have to be off for 8 hours from your last tour of duty, unless it occurs right afterwards. Like, let's say somebody's working, we have an extra duty assignment at Plaza Latina. And if a guy just worked day shift, he gets off at 6, that extra duty starts at 6. They can work that because they're work for 15 hours. It's only a 3-hour gig. So if they can work that one, it's not a big deal because they're not going to be back at work until the following day. So it's fine.
Okay.
So let's say you had to go home and sleep, then you had to have 8 hours off before you do something again.
Well, I'm all for doing things that I think that the Graham police officers are protecting Graham residents. I guess I just am concerned about the possibility of liability if you're working an Elon game and then there's a
That
shooting or
happens,
something.
that happens every time we do a mutual aid request. It's no different. We help people out. North Carolina is filled with small agencies. We all help each other out. Law enforcement in and of itself would break down if nobody could request mutual aid. We do it all the time.
They do it for us too.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. We do it all the time. I call for mutual aid on a daily basis. My guys do. We had a shooting 2 days ago. There were deputies in the city answering calls. That's how it rolls. Yeah. So that all we're doing is returning the favor. But the issue is when somebody calls for an emergency, that's part of our regular everyday job. When somebody's calling for some weird special event like a football game or A&T stuff, that's an extra duty assignment. It's completely voluntary. Nobody's being forced to do it. If nobody signed up, nobody would go. So it doesn't have anything to do with what apples and oranges.
Okay. So somebody that's calling from the school and they want somebody that knows the kids to sign up for something, can they make a request through EDS?
He's already
and
answered
get
that as illegal.
No. It depends on what, like, if somebody calls and says we want to demonstrate it for a canine officer, well, obviously you got to get a canine officer. But that's regular work duties for a demonstration or some type of community-oriented event kind of thing that's part of law enforcement education. But as far as you need somebody to work security, they're not allowed to do that. It doesn't matter if they know the kids because every officer going to do the exact same job. That's inconsequential. If you need somebody for security, you're going to get a random police officer. This is how it works.
Okay. And do we have a process in place about, or any information about, like who assumes the liability for EDS? Like-
EDS assumes their own
Yes,
liability.
yes.
It's a scheduling service.
Right, okay, so if our officer gets hurt or injured, our workers' comp covers that officer
Yes.
regardless of whether he's doing an extra duty.
Yes, because he's
Um,
performing the job as a police officer. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So we have the liability and our insurance company is okay with that, right?
Extra duty is very common in law
Extremely
enforcement.
common.
No, I know, it is. It is. I guess I was just hearing from people that were, when I asked, I said, give me the goods, give me the bad. They said, and I don't know why they said this, again, I'm just taking off what they said. They said, if you go to something like EDS rather than you guys doing your own, they said there was less accountability. So of course, I want to ask you about that.
That would be
And
correct.
they said that a lot of the officers won't sign up, and that you'll lose a lot of officers. So I guess my question was why, I didn't understand
I
that
don't know who
part.
told you that, and I'm just gonna speak frankly, that's absurd. That's ridiculous.
I think if
We're not making them do anything other than what they're already doing.
I think if we,
Now, rather than signing their name on a wall, they're signing it via text message.
She said something about that they could do their own taxes and that through EDS, they have, I don't know. Do you
mean,
know what she
also
was,
right.
EDS
Texas.
takes us,
takes the
takes us
taxes out
out.
or something?
well, EDS issues them their tax statements.
Yes, that's what we've always done. Officers, I mean,
But instead of,
they get 1099, so
instead of
that's,
15, 1099s, you get one.
yeah, they'll handle that for them.
You're independent
make-
contractors.
It streamlines the process.
Which we do this for other things. Officials,
Yes,
we contract with an agency that schedules the officials for us for recreation.
yeah.
Somewhat similar.
Mhm.
Extra duty, I would argue that if we prohibited our officers from engaging in extra duty, we would probably lose officers.
Yeah,
Well,
that-
no, I'm not suggesting that at all. Please don't repeat that I'm suggesting that.
okay,
I'm
that's what it
just-
sounded like from a
I'm-
police officer standpoint.
Oh, no, I'm not suggesting that. I'm just wanting to know, are we covered for liability? Are we covered for
I mean, far as I
making
know-
sure that an officer hasn't worked till 2 a.m. in the morning and then has to report to duty the next morning at 8 a.m. and has some sort of issue and we weren't making sure that those extra duty assignments weren't going to officers that were already scheduled, that there is that oversight. I get
Yes.
concerned when we start using a third party that is in Connecticut to do our scheduling. and-
The simplest way to put this out is that I don't know anybody to explain. See, it's like this chart. All we're doing is saying instead of somebody at the police department posting a chart on the wall, we got another entity making a chart posting on the wall. Same policies are in place to cover all that stuff. The same supervisor overwatch. Nothing changed other than the person making the schedule. All we got was hired somebody to take care of the administrative nightmare that was making that calendar. That's all it was.
Okay. So that has the city attorney looked at any, and the insurance is okay with us using, with the officers working this extra duty outside of Graham? I just don't want officers to be, I feel a lot better when you started out your conversation saying that someone is monitoring the
Mhm.
scheduling, because what I kept hearing overwhelmingly from a lot of different, and cities even as, as small as ours, that were saying, nobody was kind of paying attention because like you said, Jerry, there's 14 or 15 different people. And so no one person was really, it was kind of like it wasn't any one person's job. And so they were working all these extra hours and they were dealing with fatigue.
Yeah, and that happens
And
with large
I'm like,
agencies
it's
and
pretty
situations.
sad that our officers are feeling like they have to work all these extra duty solution jobs and not just come and be a police officer. I mean, we need to pay them a living wage that, in my opinion, is you put on a vest and go run into a building to get shot at. I think, I don't like the idea of comp time. I don't like the idea of, we have cooks at restaurants that, they make minimum wage. They don't need to be, you have to pay them for every hour they work. And to say that you can work 500 hours and nobody pay you, I have a kind of a personal problem with that.
I
I
understand
want to
that,
make sure that,
but that's.
honestly, the thing about EDS is in no way trying to impair the police officer, but just trying to make sure that we have oversight as a city.
Yeah, yeah, like I said, this policy's been in place. As far as I know, we've been working extra duty for 4 decades. It's nothing new.
The EDS is new.
And like I
Using
said,
the-
the person making the calendar, the only thing that's new, the oversights and checks and balances and the supervisor overwatch is all the same. Nothing's changed. On our end, it's
Okay.
almost seamless. Like I said, all it is instead of also having to drive to the police department, somebody would have to email it and go, I put out the extra duty schedule. People had to drive from their homes all the way to the PD and sign something home to the wall or send an email back and forth. They can just sign it from their phone. That's the only difference. Yeah, it's actually seamless. The officers don't have any issue with it whatsoever. It didn't affect them in any way. Yeah. They don't even, other than
Okay.
getting text messages, it didn't change for them.
That it?
Yeah.
Jennifer, where'd she go? Questions?
Thanks real quick. And this will be for Tony. How you doing?
How you doing?
For Frankie, just as much as Tony may not know this, not only is there an extensive labor intense process that goes on with that process of scheduling, but there's also one of the, I think the consistent thing that has to do with a lot of this is the FLSA and the ability of when you can work and when you can't work. And that's why most agencies have gone to this third party so that they can sign up as an independent contractor, if you will, so that they can be scheduled, because there are issues with how many hours you can do, how much money you can make. There are FLSA issues, and that's the big part of this, correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Secondly, what is the appropriate time period that you feel is a good amount of time for someone who's holding a special event to call EDS and let them know that they're having an event and they require officer assistance?
For scheduling purposes, generally speaking, I would say 2 weeks plus. I mean, I'm not sure what the minimum was they set up with EDS. That was Chief Cole that set up that agreement with them on what was considered notice and what was considered late notice. But generally speaking, as far in my experience of trying to get a hold of officers to get stuff scheduled, that you would need a couple weeks just to, because a lot of times, you know, you got other events going on. If you do it inside that time frame, then you're gonna have trouble.
Right. Thank you so much, Tony.
Yes, ma'am.
Ricky, questions, please.
I have
Chip.
Yes. Your comp time, it's been brought so much about in the last week. An officer gets comp time, but he gets compensated for that comp time somewhere along the line. Is that correct?
Technically,
He gets comp. I mean, he's not gonna have comp time on the books and never get anything for it. I mean, he gets time off.
He's compensated.
He gets time off or he gets pay eventually.
Yeah, he or she is compensated one way or another.
Well, what do you mean paid eventually?
Well, I work for the state. I got comp time.
Yeah.
And I kept that comp time as long as I could. So when I retired from the state, I got a check for all my comp time and that went towards my retirement. So that's my point.
Right, yeah.
But eventually they get paid. I mean,
Yeah,
they
if
get
you stay here,
compensated. So you may have comp time, but you're getting compensated somewhere along the way.
Upon separation.
If
Yeah,
you leave, yes.
Yeah, so it's not, you're not just working for free.
I guess that's a matter of opinion, but no, you are compensated.
Personally, I like comp time because it didn't get taxed.
I've never had an issue with it, but.
But anyway.
Younger
anyway,
officers, different.
Anyway,
situations.
just want to clear that up.
Yes, sir.
Secondly, when an officer makes himself available for extra duty, wherever he goes, he's a police officer, right?
As long as there's a MOU or mutual aid agreement.
That's what I'm
yes.
saying. With this EDS, he's a police officer no matter where he goes, on extra duty.
Mhm.
He has arrest power, he has all that
Yes.
stuff. So he's an officer.
Yes.
Okay. So, you know, I worked basketball, football for many years. We had an assigner. So the way I'm looking at this thing, he assigned us for our ball games. So the way I look at this thing, EDS, they are an assigner. We call them booking agents, but I don't use
Yes,
that word. But
That's a good example.
they are an assigner, exactly.
Yeah, they
Okay.
just make a schedule. That's all
Okay.
they do.
All right, thank you.
Tony, I just got a couple of, do y'all like this system?
So far, it's working out for us, yes, sir.
If we have an event come, let's say the protest of ICE not long ago came to Graham, and they came with a parade permit, can we charge for the police officers it took to cover that event?
I'm assuming so. So far, we hadn't done anything like that for stuff that falls up under the normal umbrella of police services.
But if they came in and say, I've got a parade event, this is what I'm doing, and you send back, we're gonna need 40 officers to cover this, can we not book 40 officers
Possibly,
to
yeah.
cover
I mean,
that
well,
event?
yeah, you could. We don't have 40 officers. but-
I know. Well, what happens when you overcome the manpower? problem?
Well, we have the contract we have signed with that automatically go to the sheriff's department because they're signed on with EDS. as
And
well.
what
So
happens if you cover the sheriff's department? We have more than that. Does it go?
they can contact Burlington,
Okay.
or that is going to be short.
And then it goes to Greensboro?
I'm not sure about that. I can, yeah,
But there
I'll
is
have to check
coverage.
with the assistant chief on that one.
Since you've had this in force, have we ever missed having somebody at an event?
No, sir.
Any other questions? Tony? You want to ask Tony a question or?
Yes,
Okay.
well,
I'm sorry, I ought to tell him Lieutenant Velez, I'm sorry.
how long does the city use the EDS system?
I think we went to 6-7 months ago, maybe.
Last summer, I want to say.
Okay, it might have been almost, yeah.
All right, and have you noticed any particular change in the frequency or proportion of officers who sign up from the old system versus the EDS system?
No.
And about what proportion of officers do sign up for extra duty?
Nah, I couldn't tell you right. I mean, it's we have certain ones that like to work extra duty. I'd say 30% of them. But that's just a guess. Yeah.
All right, several examples were given, and I'm not certain whether these were just hypothetical or not. For Graham Police Department, extra duty, do they sometimes involve going out of the county? A&T was one example used, but I don't know if that's
Yes.
real or not.
Yes.
They can go out of the county.
Yes. MOUs and memorandums of understanding or legal paperwork they have to sign between the agencies and the chiefs to make that happen, where you're extending police powers to neighboring jurisdictions to come and assist you with a problem that you're having.
All right, but for the most part, would you say they're local / Alamance County, either Graham property?
Oh, 90% of our, like the A&T thing happens.
Here.
We've done that twice in my almost 19-year career.
And I think I understood this from your example, but in other words, the total hours that a police officer can work, you sort of said there's no limit, if I understood part of it, but yet they're within 24 hours, you've got to have 8-hour.
No, they had to have 8 hours off
8 hours.
between tours of duty.
Okay,
You had, but between one time you come to work and the next time you come to work, you had to have 8 hours off.
right. Is there anything about this system that has reduced or restrained Graham's police officers in working the normal hours of the police job?
No, it changed. They're not allowed to interfere with one of the.
All right, and so for instance, if officers volunteered, signing up for a Saturday night football game or something like that, and something like the demonstration happened, that was not on a Saturday, but let's just say it did, and the police officers are called in sort of on police department duty, EDS would be secondary and would have to be told something's coming
Yes,
up. We
yeah.
can't
In
do
emergency situations, we can call officers in when they're off work, and or if they're some extra duty assignment, which would not take priority. Yes, we would have.
But I think EDS has a system that moves you from department to department that's members of the EDS system. So they would go from Graham to Burlington to Graham to the sheriff's department, then to Burlington, and then to Guilford County, if I'm not mistaken.
But you were talking about the protest, the illegal one we had on.
Well, the one I think Mayor referred to, the one over here on Maple Street.
That's the one I referred to, but an illegal one where we
Yeah,
have.
that would be an emergent situation where we would call people away
Then
from
they would
there.
call EDS and it would move to another department.
That's-
Instead of Dwayne Flood having to work 10 hours.
Yeah.
This has saved Officer Flood a lot of time, I think.
Yes, man. Yes, sir. Sorry. Yes.
Any other questions for Officer Velez?
I very much appreciate, you helping me understand this because I did have some concerns about liability. I have concerns about police officers, not getting paid the living wage and feeling like they're having to do all these carry these secondary jobs. I want police officers to be paid well. And please believe me, that is the goal of my conversation here. But
I understand.
I want to look out for police officers. I also want us to have some oversight and make sure that a police officer isn't having to work 16 hours and then not be able to come in fresh to work his
Exactly.
normal job.
Yeah, and we
Please,
have
please
policy
believe
in place
me
to
that that
make
is
it.
where my goal is. And I think we need to be closer on that gap between the 20 and the 30. But I very much appreciate your time and explaining. And you made me feel a lot better when you talked about the oversight.
Yes.
There's still oversight there and they still are very well aware of what the officers are working.
Yes. I mean, to try to sum that up, our shifts are relatively small. So I think every 3, 4, 5 officers, there's a supervisor who covers who goes over their schedule. So they know it's not like in a lot of these where you got officers that's not showing up for work or something late, nobody knows it. Yeah, they can't do that. There's not enough. You can't blend it. Our crowd isn't big enough for you to hide in it. So.
Thank you, LT. I appreciate
Thank
you.
you.
Nope.
All right, this was a discussion. We will not take any action on it. It's already in place, and we just wanted everybody to know what the police department was doing. So next we go to number 3, request of Marlene Dolan to change the speed limit from 20 miles per hour for the villas at Hanford. Now, this is a request, and what we usually do with those requests is move it to the police department for a month to have them study that. Do I have a consensus
Yes,
to do
I
that?
think that's what we should do, yes.
Okay, you all right with that, Jennifer? Jennifer?
Mhm.
Okay. So I've got a 5-person consensus that we will do that. Move that to the staff for the police department to check that for us. And next, we have a petition for voluntary contiguous annexation for 13.818 acres located at 919 and 957 Woody Drive. Nathan, you're handling this for us, please?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. The attached petition seeks the council's approval for an extension of the corporate limits to include the subject property. The area being considered for annexation is connected to Woody Drive and Whittemore Road. Water and sewer are both available in the vicinity, with the applicant to extend private lines internal to the development. The annexation process has multiple steps. The preliminary steps following the receipt of a petition are to adopt 2 resolutions that are outlined in the requested action. Approval of these resolutions does not finalize the annexation, as council is required to advertise and conduct a public hearing, followed by a vote on an annexation ordinance.
Questions for staff? Melody, I believe it's your turn.
No, sir. Things pretty
Ricky,
straightforward.
questions for the staff?
Is this property zone R18 now, according to the map on the wall? Is it still going to stay the R18?
This property is zoned conditional residential.
Okay.
No question.
Questions, Jennifer?
Just that, tell me again, Frankie, about this. So the clerk does an investigation on the petition, and then this will come back up again, right?
Yes, so the council takes 2 actions tonight. It's one to basically ask the clerk to investigate the petition, landowners, and those things. That's called the certificate of sufficiency. And the second resolution is to set a date for a public hearing on the consideration of an annexation ordinance, which the ordinance is what effectuates the actual annexation. That typically happens the following month.
And do we know what's going to be here?
Yes, it's a mixed-use residential development, mostly apartments and some townhomes and a small portion of commercial property, commercial use.
And they want to be annexed in before, are they going to just go under a strict rezoning?
They have already went through the rezoning process.
Okay. So they're not going to need council approval for anything, right?
Not related to land use, no.
Okay.
There is a scenario wherein the applicant could do a subdivision of the townhome portion to sell out the townhomes as individual owner occupied townhomes, which would require a subdivision approval because it's, if I remember correctly, it's more than 20 townhomes, so it would require council approval.
Yeah, that's correct. It would depend on how the developer chooses to divide the properties or not.
Okay. And do we get any kind of cost estimates as to the annexation?
The process or the end result?
The cost of bringing this property in?
So the cost is going to depend, the ultimate value to the city depends on the end use of the property. There's existing water lines there along Woody, I know, and I believe there's sewer. If it's not contiguous, it's very close to the subject property. The roadways are NCDOT roadways, so the traditional expenses we would have with annexation, in this case, there's not nearly as many, say, if it were a single family subdivision where you would have streets and stormwater infrastructure, street lights, garbage collection, those type things. Here, there's very little of that.
Okay, but can we get that of what it's going to cost?
I could give you an estimate. I'd have to talk with the developer and determine the value of his properties and the occupancy and expected occupancy rates. But I can tell you, it's going to be a positive yield. It's going to be a yield for the city, just based on the land use and the knowledge that we're not maintaining that street. We're not providing sanitation service.
And the internal water and sewer will be private.
Private, yes. And there's no existing, we're maintaining the same water line that's already there. I'm
We're
not
not
sure if they're going
extending the
to,
water, not extending the utilities.
I would have to look at the development plans, but I would imagine if there's any extension, it would be up Whittemore Road for a loop. But I don't know that we've gotten that far with the engineering yet.
All that I've seen has been private extensions of the water and sewer lines.
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am. Anybody else want to speak on this?
Just a question of location. The numbers are far apart, but I gather these are adjacent properties.
Okay.
And Woody Drive, just by what's left, bound to be on the right-hand side.
Yeah.
Going out.
It's outside.
Anyone else want to speak on this? If not, we'll close the public hearing. We'll talk about it among ourselves. It's not a public hearing, excuse me. I'll move you to page 51 on your agenda and ask for a motion.
Do you need both motions at the same time?
Let's
or
take
do you
them one
need
at
to
a
do it?
time, please.
Thank you. I move we approve the resolution directing the clerk to investigate a petition received under General Statute 168-31 for a 13.818 acre area on Woody Drive.
I need a second.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed likewise. Second motion on page 57 again. Oop, page 51, I'm sorry.
Mr. Mayor, I move we approve the resolution fixing date of public hearing on question of annexation pursuant to General Statute 168-31 for a 13.818 acre area on Woody Drive.
Thank you, ma'am. I need a second.
Second.
Thank you, sir. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed likewise.
Excuse me,
Good deal.
was there a date?
It's in the
I'm
resolution.
sorry, we need to date
It's
the
in it.
date.
It's in the resolution.
Okay, great. Thank you.
April 4th.
All right, we've got one person, Dean Ward wanted to speak on 1143 Challenge Drive. Dean, if you would, please. Good to have you here again.
Mayor, I'm gonna try to keep this short and sweet so we can get out of here
All
tonight.
right.
I know it's budget time and we're considering new things for the city for the upcoming year, y'all's retreat. I'm here tonight representing the planning board and the Board of Adjustment as chairman of both, with a vote from each one of the boards recommending I come before the council tonight to request that for the Board of Adjustments for the council to consider contracting with an attorney to represent the Board of Adjustments outside of the city's attorney, because of the city's attorneys representing the city's interest, not the Board of Adjustments' interest. And I just want the council to consider that and think about that during their retreat to see if there was a way to handle that. There's times during the quasi judicial proceedings and stuff that we need some legal advice. And especially the Board of Adjustments, we can't ask Nathan or the city's attorney for advice. And we just like to have our own there.
Okay.
There's also times during the planning board meetings that we would like to have some legal opinions, and which the city attorney would certainly suffice for us if that was appropriate by the council to allow that to happen.
I'll advise the city to look into this for us. We'll contact our attorneys here and see what other people are doing, and we'll get back with you on it.
I know when I first was appointed to the board, the city attorney used to attend all planning board meetings. Somewhere during that tenure, I reckon expense or everybody's schedule become, more focused and a whole lot more going on, and they don't attend anymore. But I don't know if that was just something that they was doing out of courtesy or what, but I don't think we would need a full-time attorney for the planning board. Just quasi judicial proceedings and stuff like that, the more serious events that may be happening that night may dictate whether we would need one for that. But I do think we would need one for the Board of Adjustments on a regular basis.
We'll have another budget retreat. I'll let you know when that is, and we will bring this up at the budget retreat.
Thank you. Thank you,
Yes, sir.
John.
Thank you. All right. Mary, have you got anything? Bob, have you got anything? Okay. Nathan,
No, sir, Mr. Mayor.
Aaron,
No, sir.
Brian.
Mr. Mayor, I apologize. Were you going to speak about the firemen? I was just going to say they did a great job on,
Oh, on the fire at, on Cannon Street?
thank you.
I'll speak on that. Thank you. Melody, anything to add?
Yes, sir.
Ricky?
I have one thing.
Yes, sir.
The Piedmont Piedmont Triad Regional Council is having a Triad tomorrow public summit, policy summit. And it's on the 1st of April. And they're going to have both federal, state, and local dignitaries there. And it's going to be held at A&T State University. And I sent every one of you a copy of the email, and you'll have to register to get a parking pass.
Thank you for reminding us. I appreciate it. Jim,
No, sir.
Jennifer, have you got anything else to add?
Okay, I just wanted to, ask about, when the website will roll out.
Oh, my thunder.
Ah,
Well, I didn't
Should-
mean to, I'm
that's
sorry.
okay.
You can have all the
No.
thunder. I'm
It should
happy
be
for you to
target
take
by
all
the
the
end of
thunder.
the month. That's
Huh?
our target dates by the end of this month.
Well, can you give us a highlight of what we can expect?
Hopefully, it's a little easier to navigate. Different color scheme, different emblem. You may have seen a rectangular emblem that's been floated. That's sort of the emblem that you'll see consistent with the website. Should be a better user experience. I won't swear that we don't have some kinks that we'll have to work out, but we're in the process of proofing the site now and making sure we have adequate content. And I think we've got 99% of the content loaded. So hopefully by the end of the month.
Will the different department heads and stuff be able to input information directly, or is it still through a?
A little of both. If you've been granted access as a department head or administrator through IT, you can update certain content. There's certain things we don't want to allow our users to update, such as images or page structure, menus, but some of the content, most that need access will have access to it. Certain more complicated things, we will run that through IT or others.
Okay, that's all I have.
Man, we've got two things with the fire department. They had a working structure fire on Cannon Street. They did a great job. The building's still there. It was fully involved when they got there. I showed up right as they got there on time, and they did an excellent job, had a good turnout. And we want to thank them and the civilians that got involved. They pulled a couple people out of a house, and we will probably have to do something about that. We've never had a life-saving award for the city for a civilian. I think it's about time, because we've got these guys we're gonna have to look at. And the fire department went live with their EMS service, running calls starting Monday morning at 8 o'clock. I was up here for their first call, and they sent alternating trucks, engine 4, engine 3, 2 people on each truck for the first response for EMS. And they were really, really excited to do it. And it's really made a difference in some of the full-time staff, that they're proud of what they're doing and they're excited about what they're doing. And with that, I need a motion to adjourn. I need a second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank everybody for being here. We appreciate it.